we are not our thoughts. So when we're journaling, we recognize that, oh, it's a something that, a thought that can come and go, or a feeling that could come and go. And it's not me, but we believe that that is us. And that's where the negative chemical reaction happens in the body. And that's where the stress and the anxiety and like the self-sabotage and all that stuff happens afterwards. It's a voice. These thoughts are voices. These parts are voices in our head. And then the more training, the more practice, the more discipline, the less and less intense, loud the thoughts and the experience that happens after.
Hey, I'm Esther, and you are listening to On Your Own, the podcast for Jewish girls living away from home. Each week, we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you confidently navigate life on your own so you can achieve real growth and independence and take ownership of this foundational stage of your life. For additional resources, tips, and to stay up to date on future episodes, sign up for the On Your Own newsletter, linked below in the description. Looking forward to spending some time with you today. And now, to this week's episode. Who are you, and what is it that you do?
So, who am I? Well, if I have to answer that technically, my name is Chana Gorenstein. And I live in Sfas, Israel, in the north, yes, with my husband and 5 kids. So, what do I do? So, these days, my focus is my coaching, and I'm a food fitness and recovery and wellness coach. And I focus specifically on a woman's relationship with food, cleaning, how to clean that up and or rectify, depends on where a woman falls in her relationship with the food, whether it's disorderly, bad habit, or addictive even. And according to the Torah. And so that's what I do. I do that through online courses and individual coaching. I think that's all. That's what occupies, besides mom and wife and all that stuff.
And all that stuff. Amazing.
Right.
So, if someone's logged on, a young woman is just logged on to this conversation, what can she hope to gain from our conversation together today?
Well, we're not going to talk about the food, actually. We're going to talk about journaling, because creative journaling is what I like to call it. I used to teach it in the seminary over here, and I actually had to step back from that position because, as I said, I'm focusing more on the coaching. But I've been doing it for many, many years. I was, facilitating writing circles. I'm in the middle of a online course right now, a different online course focusing on journaling, and I'm an avid journaler. So, what can she expect to gain? I hope a tool on how to, on how to kind of handle life. I really enjoy Sarah Connor Radcliffe. She's a marriage therapist, counselor, educator, and she's just out there in the world. And she, one of the things that she teaches is that we need helpers. We need helpers these days, inside helpers and outside helpers. So, um, an example of an outside helper is essential oils, something we're using to help us regulate and find our center is the way I like to say it. Exercise. I know you had a recent podcast. That is actually an outside helper. Food, a food plan. That's an outside helper. That's actually where you're using something to really just tap into and step into our best self. Journaling, therapy. I don't have to list all the spiritual tools for bring-ins and mashpia conversation, a good conversation, a good davening, meditation, visualization. All those are inside helpers that I just mentioned. So journaling, we all actually we are all a creative. We all have creativity. That's actually a reflection of. It's one of the C's. When I say C's, I mean the 8 C's of center, according to the parts modality or internal family systems. We know when we're in a centered space, when we're feeling creative. Everybody's, in a creative space. So journaling is one way to really tap into that creativity. But beside that, and mainly as I'm saying, especially if a person is creative, it is a tool that really regulates, aligns. It's a self-reflective tool. It's almost like it's my breath, as like a daily journaler. I don't want to say I can't imagine my life without it, but it would certainly look different.
Hmm, that's very interesting.
Last night, for example, I did an exercise workshop with the seminary girls over here, and I said, guys, what are you doing to regulate? These days we don't have the luxury of choosing, or taking the time to show up to regulation techniques, because we're in the north. We're living through a war. Yesterday there was a handful of sirens. What are you doing? What are you doing to bring yourself back to yourself? So
Hmm.
exercise, high intensity exercise, actually was one way that I did it with them. Journaling is another. All the things that I do really are different expressions of an opportunity for me to find myself, and step into my best self, whether that's exercise, whether that's journaling, whether that's coaching, really, and teaching, so yeah.
Okay. There's a lot here that I want to go into, but I wanted to take a step back to hear from you how you got into writing. What did that look like for you? Because it sounds like it's a very big part of your life and you do it almost every day. How'd that happen?
Well, I just want to clarify that writing is different than journaling. You don't need any prior experience to journal. You don't, like, what often is an obstacle to this tool, a misnomer, a false belief that either I have to do it right, or I can't do it at all. Either it has to be perfect, right? And that in it itself is a prompt. Like, well, if I didn't have to do it perfect, what would it look like? Or where does that belief come from that I can't do that? I have
Mm,
to do it perfect. So anyway, so that said, it's not about writing. It's not about, the journal's a mess. It's not about editing or grammar or any of that. There's actually no rules to journaling, right? It is true that if a person is a writer, which I happen to be, then, oh, I didn't even mention that. So then, your pieces are born in the journal. Everything is born in the journal, right? But you don't have to be a writer to use journaling as a tool. So, how did I get into it? I remember sitting with a notebook. I can't imagine. I must have been under second, before second grade, because I was in the first house, with a notebook under a tree.
wow.
It's always just been something that, I guess, intuitively, and that's also what we tap into when we show up to journaling, on a regular basis. We definitely, really fine tune our intuition. um, but I guess it's something I intuitively, knew that I needed to use for regulation, especially as a highly sensitive person.
So this is something you started doing naturally, basically, without anyone teaching you, telling you how to do
Right.
it.
I also did go to the College of Communications in Boston University, but there I learned how to write professionally. I did not learn at all anything about journaling or, expressive writing, or, it's, any of that. So yeah, it's just something that I I love. I love the written word. I love creativity. I love creating, whether it's with a pen, or whether it's, they say choreography is writing with your feet. I do that also. I teach, as I teach kickboxing. I'm coming up with routines all the time. So, it's just, what I do to fine tune myself. And I learn, as with anything that I enjoy, or anything that a person enjoys, they read about it, they buy books about it, they learn about it, they listen to it, and I, I started teaching it in year and year and year. It progressed.
So interesting. It's
Hmm.
interesting you said that a big misconception people have is that in order to start journaling, they think they need to be a writer.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, can you elaborate on that like a little bit? What's the difference between writing and journaling, like practically? Being a writer or having a journaling practice?
So journaling, again, as I mentioned, it's a tool for, it's a mirror. I was going to say again, it's a tool for regulation, but it's a mirror. It's a self-reflective tool. There's a lot of talk about, awareness and mindfulness. It's also mindfulness on paper. That's what it is. It's bringing you into the present moment. It's a form of meditation. The school Zohar in Pittsburgh, they do what I consider the foundation of journaling, which is a specific technique called the 3-page spill or morning pages. They do that before davening. It's part of their setup. So journaling is just the way that I explain to the girls what journaling is, or a 3-page spill. It's like this. Essentially, we want to step into our best self. We want to step into our power. We want to get in touch with all our kaiches. But there's so much stuff standing in the way. Stuff that we're aware of, stuff that we're not aware of, from every direction. The physical world, I don't know, sugar hangover, let's just say. The emotional world, unprocessed emotion. The mental world, my brain is all over the place and I just can't contain it. The spiritual world, I'm not feeding myself, as spiritually, the way that I know I should. So we have all these things coming at us from all these different directions. So the journal just is like, it's the pause. It allows us to practice the pause, find our breath, and really it takes a swipe as Julia Cameron, who is the founder of the 3-page spill. It takes a swipe at all that stuff standing in the way of us. It so everything that's coming at us, life is just like woo woo, and so the journal just slows all that down and actually shows you, when you do it in a disciplined manner, what's actually tripping you up, where it's coming from. And as you get good at it and the different techniques, it helps you work through all that stuff.
Why is writing down, I'm assuming, what's going on in our brain, and we'll get into like the process of maybe what we're writing down and the structure, but why is that so powerful to be able to take a swipe, as you said, and get those things out of the way?
Well, it separates you from you. It separates the trigger from what's going on. It shows you, wait a minute, oh, that's just a thought. That's not me. Oh, that's just a reaction. Oh, that might be where that's coming from. It gives you space to breathe. Like, it shows you it. We always get tripped up, because of the thoughts. Like, something happens, we have a thought, we're even unconscious of the thought, like, oh my god, I'm such a X, Y, and Z because of whatever happened, and then we have this whole emotional reaction, based on what just happened. But the journal slows that whole process down. Another really amazing benefit of the journal is it really fine tunes you to kind of like catching the inner critic or the Yetzer Hara in his shenanigans. It's not to say that we're not going to trip up anymore. Of course we're going to trip up. But just like training, the more that you train in something, the less you fall, the less intense when you fall, and the quicker you get up. In other words, intensity, frequency, and duration of whatever it is tripping you up goes down. So the journal tunes you into that which is going, again, it has to be a practice. Journaling is an art. Journaling is a discipline, so it has to really be a practice for you to be able to reap the benefits of that, of the journal. There's tons of books out there, to help you figure out how,
So what I'm hearing is that it's almost like a thought download. Like you're taking your thoughts out of your head where they're like part of you almost, where you see them as part of you. And in putting them on the paper, you're able to like take almost a step back and watch them and observe them and learn from them and separate yourself from them.
100%. 100%. There's a lot. I mean, that's when something's going on, for example, like, let's just talk about kids for a minute. I have a house full of teens. So, a lot of my sensitive conversations are in the journal because those are my thoughts on how I want to approach this subject. Let's say sneeze, for example, or whatever it is. It allows me to really sharpen what I believe and separate from the emotional reaction that's going on there. So if there's an emotional reaction, that's actually called something else. Because we have emotional reactions, we actually want to compartmentalize them, is what they say, meaning catch it, keep your mouth shut, and work it out. Where here's an opportunity in the journal. What just happened?
Mm.
Why? What's going on? What you could get really serious with the feeling in the body. What's the feeling saying? That's a technique called dialogue, where you go back and forth. They call it the Swiss blade of journaling, where you go back and forth between either a part of you or an emotional reaction or an emotion or even your body. I have a lot of dialogues because a lot of times, along with the food story comes body image issues. There's always body image issues at the bottom of the, buried deep down beneath. So I have a lot of dialogue, with different, with my thighs. Hey guys, I call them Lululemon. What's going on? Like, why are you so upset? Like, let's talk about that. They're the best. So the 3-page spill is a technique that really just gets, kind of takes a swipe at your conscious, like all the stuff in your head, the chatter. And because the chatter is like background noise, just imagine, what, on Shabbos, when all of a sudden it's quiet, you're like, wow, I didn't realize,
Yeah.
so the chatter, once it calms down, you have that much more access to your kaichais. It's like, whoa, I didn't even know that was there. So that's what the journal does. I'm saying, when there's stuff going on, and there's always stuff going on, but then there's other parv, let's say, opportunities. I'll put in my Rosh Hashanah menu over there, or I'll work through I actually have different journals for different things. I have a lot of journals. But yeah, I'll just explain, because I'm sure you're already wondering what journals I have. I have a journal. I'm looking at like 4 of them right now. I have a journal for the 3-page spill, which means the morning journal. Just like I show up, it's part of my morning routine after other different techniques that I use to like regulate. I have a yoman, which is like obviously for appointments. I have a journal for my work. 2 different types of journals for my work. One is obviously a to-do, and one is a gratitude journal specifically for work. I have a food journal where I, record and track my food. And I also have like a tracking journal, which, kind of reviews my week and my month and my goals. So there's a lot of different ways you could use a journal to, like, it also, like, not only emotionally, but also mentally. Like, those different types of journals are for my very neurodivergent brain. It contains me. Without it, I'm all over the place and just late for appointment. I'm still late for appointments, so the journal doesn't help with that. But
Mm.
yeah,
It's reminding me almost of what I have, like similar, not really exactly like that because I'm just less disciplined with it, but on my phone. And I feel like maybe a lot of us have like all these different kind of notes on our phone for different things, writing down the menu for this and the plans for this. And I'm wondering, is there a difference between having, these kind of things available on your phone to write down or having it in an actual physical journal?
elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. I mean, this and that. They're going to say this and they're going to say that. On the one hand, they're going to say, you know what? If you're not going to write otherwise, go for it. Do it on your phone. On the other hand, there is something that happens with the hand and the brain connection. There's something going on when you bring the pen to paper. So if you can, that is obviously much better. Yeah.
Mm.
So, but again, if you're not going to do it otherwise, you'll still obviously reap the benefits of journaling by showing up, whichever way you show up. The point of the point, you got to show up, and that's where it comes. That's where it's a discipline. Like all
Hmm.
habits that we want to incorporate into our life. Some we work, and this is something that I talk about in my course. Some we work on in like in the realm of discipline, and some are non-negotiables, and they become non-negotiables essentially come hell or high water. Because we know how much we benefit from them. When my kids see me, off a little bit, And the off these days do not compare at all to the off, back in the day when I was not aware that the way that I was showing up was from a reactive place, right? So they're like, mommy, you want a yoga? Mommy, you need your journal. Mommy, you need your oils? So they know what it is. On the one hand, it's a little bit bittersweet because back in the day, people would think of, if they were to envision their mother, they would envision their mother with a Sefer Tehillim. For me, my kids envision me with a journal. Now, I have mixed feelings. I think because I'm actually so high maintenance, my self-care is soul care. Not to say that obviously there's no soul care. You know what I'm saying? But the point of the matter is, if I don't have my regulation habits, I am nowhere in the sitter or at the Verbrengen, but my head is somewhere else, or my body is somewhere else, or my feelings are somewhere else. These things make me a fit kli so that I can. They're all a means to an end. They're not an end in and of itself. Like, so that I can be the best mother, so that I can show up, to life, as a shlucha, and in my community, and as a coach, v'chudu, etc.
I wanted to go back to what you were saying about that kind of like that there's this chatter, right? And that we have to kind of get beyond that because I'm thinking back to when I left home for the first time and all the way for a couple of years afterwards, that chatter pretty much dictated my life. Like I feel like you're like so casually being like, yeah, it's just chatter. We need to get it out of the way. The way I saw it was like, this is me, and what it tells me, what I am hearing in that process of my thoughts is the truth, is who I am, and I have to listen to it all the time. And I think that a lot of people have a hard time separating themselves from their thoughts because they do, from the moment that we're aware of who we are, I think that comes along with all of the thoughts that come along with that. So I wanted to hear what you think about that, like that process of, how do we separate ourselves from our thoughts? What does that mean, and why is that important?
Wow, that's a heavy question. Okay, so one of the things that I teach is that chatter is a sign. It's a sign. Essentially, it's like this, like a sign. What does that mean? A sign that we're steering from our centered self. What does that mean? Well, now, what is the chatter? It is actually a conglomeration of thoughts. Like it's one part of us against another part of us. It's a battle. Chatter is a battle in our minds.
What do you mean it's one part against another part? What do you mean by that?
So, well, what if we actually step back from the chatter? There's always one part of us, like let's say our impulse, or our impulse is our Yetzirah wanting something. I'm going to use food as an example because for me it's the easiest.
Sure.
I want that honey cake, and all the chatter that comes around that, meaning like I'm saying fill in the blank, it looks so good. Oh no, you shouldn't have it. Boom. Those are two different parts. I want it. No, you shouldn't have it. Okay. Two different parts are speaking.
Right.
You meaning the you could call it the lower brain, the higher brain, the nefesh kids, or the nefesh sichlis, the nefesh bahamis. One part, my impulses versus my higher adult self. Right, like there. That's the thing. Like when we don't use the journal or other self-reflective techniques to step back from these thoughts that are happening all the time, we don't even recognize them. We don't even hear it. And then when we step back, we're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then we can understand even where they're coming from. So chatter is a sign. That's what I always say, which means like, again, for the way that I'm gonna be extreme right now because it helps prove an example. Again, with the food, and a lot of times we're in a mess with some people. Not everybody, for sure, not everybody, but some people. Their unhealthy relationship leads to a lot of chatter and constriction in their head. Mm-hmm. It's just not quiet. So basically, they we get them, they come up with boundaries for themselves because a person knows themselves best. So they come up with boundaries that work for themselves. And then they try to show up to honoring them. Let's say a person says, I'm going to have, I don't know, 3 meals a day and a snack or something like this. That's a boundary. Or I'm only going to have sugar at the end of a meal. Everybody's different. So everybody has different boundaries. And then it's like, oh, come on. Your sister just made awesome cookies and it's coconut sugar and whatever. Right? So that's a part of us that's trying to pull us away from one of our non-negotiables and one of our boundaries. And really, that's chatter. So I say chatter is a sign, and then there's a work through. How do we deal with that? Well, for some people, this chatter is so debilitating, it's like a terrorist. The answer is, well, do we negotiate with terrorists? We just don't negotiate with terrorists. And so as soon as you say, I'm sorry, I hear you want something, I'm sure, whatever. We could talk about that. I'm saying that's a different story. But as soon as you're just like, you kind of just say, I recognize something's going on here, but I'm not going to give in. The chatter automatically quiets. It could be pushed. It could be you could get pulled in that for so long. Another thing, we are not our thoughts. We are not our thoughts. So when we're journaling, we recognize that, oh, it's something that, a thought that can come and go, or a feeling that could come and go, and it's not me. But because we believe that is us, and that's where the negative chemical reaction happens in the body, and that's where the stress and the anxiety and like the self-sabotage and all that stuff happens afterwards. So yeah, that's why, like, generally, they say with addiction, a person's first thought or their impulse, because they've been used to like not honoring their word or really mistreating their bodies, it's always a wrong one. It's a voice. These thoughts are voices. These parts are voices in our head. So that's one thought. And then and then the more training and the more practice, the more discipline with whatever boundaries, and journaling is a boundary. I want to do this to find myself, right? The less and less intense, loud the thoughts and the experience that happens afterwards.
I love what you said that we don't negotiate with terrorists. We have
That's what it's chazak.
Yeah, because I feel like when it comes also to just boundaries in our Yiddishkeit, that when we haven't set a clear boundary, let's say even with sneers, like we don't have a clear boundary like elbow, okay? Then the moment we see something that's like just above the elbow, but we, it becomes this whole back and forth and discussion and argument, as opposed to when we have like these really strong set boundaries, like non-negotiable. Like
That's
if you
it.
see my elbow, then it's just non-negotiable. And I find that when it comes to tznius, when it comes to different areas of Yiddishkeit, the moment that something opens up as a negotiable, all those thoughts rush in, and it's this back and forth, and it's a battle, and it just feels so much more draining to serve Hashem. And with the food as well, I remember, the moment that like something seemed more like parav and in the middle when it came to my food rules, that's when the battle came back. And it was always this back and forth. So that's very interesting. You're saying that sometimes when we just have that boundary very strong, that chatter can leave. I really like that. When you said yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just want to add. I just want to like mention. How do we know that like these are the right boundaries for us? I'm saying regarding food, regarding anything, regarding what you're saying Yiddishkeit, because it comes from the Torah. It comes from the Torah. So there's no because I have so much to say and nothing to say at the same time. When we're talking about boundaries that come from the Torah, they cannot be wrong. They are only good for us. They get us only in touch with our higher self, and like really. So anything that's pulling us away from that in any area of our life, Yiddishkeit, food, exercise, emotional, mental, spiritual, anything, it's again, where it's coming from based on the results, right? So then that's a hayom yom, right? So you do the process, but an easy way out is like, wait a minute. First of all, never in the moment. Never in the moment. There's something pulling me away from myself. Okay, awesome. I hear you. I see you. I'm going to take a note. I'll come back to you later. And then we could actually think into it, because in the moment, think about a kid. Let's use discipline for a minute. Think about a kid, in a tantrum. I remember learning from Dina Friedman, an amazing course, parenting course way back when, when a kid is in a tantrum, it's like they're speaking French, and you're going to come and talk to them about, I don't know, the necessity to discipline, the necessity to show up to your blah blah blah. They're speaking French because they're in their heart and their emotional world. You're trying to speak intellect. You're speaking Spanish. There's nothing going on there. So same too with an internal tantrum. If we're moving away from ourselves, and a chatter is an expression of an internal tantrum. There's no speaking in that moment. You gotta, like, as Sarah Chana says, compartmentalize. Okay, I hear you, I see you, I get it. There's something going on here. I'm going to take it to my journal. I'm going to take it to a Verbringen. I'm going to take it to whatever it is that you use to, reflect. Or I'm going to take it to my time by myself. But the journal and a connection with another person, that pulls it outside of you. More so a person. I like to. It's just a process, because you could ask, well, what's the difference between a mashpia and a journal? If your journal, holds the truth and gets you in touch with your higher self, who needs a mashpia? Well, of course, it gets you closer and closer to your true self and your intuition and clarity, calm, creativity. But at the end of the day, we all can fool ourselves. Yeah. And so it's best to take, the bigger decisions and the things that are not resolved simply in the journal, outside of yourself. At the end of the day, it's the same vort. Aselecha rav, konelecha chaver, kne, because the quill, you actually need both. You need the chaver and you need the quill.
So interesting. So you mentioned a few times this idea of finding our center, and that the process of journaling can, get us through the chatter, which is a sign of maybe more of like an internal tantrum that needs to be resolved. I love that. I'm going to totally use it, an internal tantrum. Because dealing with a lot of tantrums these days, and my mind definitely sometimes reflects that tension that I'll feel with my 2-year-old, when we're just not on the same page, and we both have something that we want and we're not getting anywhere. I definitely see the correlation with my own mind. So what do you mean when you say finding your center? What if someone doesn't know what their center is? What if they're afraid to find out what their center is?
Okay, center, I like to describe it like this. Like the world describes it as waking up on the wrong side of the bed. Or think about when you're constricted. When you're feeling in your power and you're good, and when you're not, there's days when your kid, all of them at the same time, could be having tantrums, and you could roll with it. The punches from life are coming at you each way, and you're like, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. You keep missing them. And then there's days where you just get hit again and again and again. And then finally you fall on your face. So center is when, as I said before, like there's 8 C's that describe a person feeling in their centered self. I like this, I'll tell you the C's, and then I'll explain the way I like to understand it. So the C's are clarity, creativity, curiousness, compassion, connectedness, confidence, and courageousness. When we're feeling any of those things, it's a siman that we are in our centered self. So the way that I like to describe center is through a mashal. When I was younger, I used to play softball, and there was a field there was a parking lot between, 2 sets of fields. On the right-hand side of the field was for the little leagues, and on the left-hand side of the parking lot, was the big leagues. So essentially, center is either, playing with the little leagues, meaning center is the parking lot. When we're in our centered space, we're safe. We feel good. And from there, we can really step into our higher kaichais, our neshama, play with the big leaguers, play with the Moshe inside of us, and the Aaron and the Miriam, like on the big leagues. But when we're knocked off center, so then we play with like the players within us that pull us down, all the different different manifestations of ego, that part of us that wants us to eat, or that part of us that wants us to isolate, or that part of us that wants us to rage or react. We're playing with the paro inside of us. We're playing with the bilak or the balam inside of us. We're pulled away from our centered self. Our centered self is like, it's almost like it's like almost a part of state of being. We could either go this way or that way. That's the way I like to envision it. Like every day I wake up, and it's kind of like the way that the previous Rebbe described it. Like our neshama is in our nose, and we have to work to pull it into throughout our body. These days, the way that I see it is that we're so messed up. It's not only the neshama that we have to pull throughout all the different dimensions of the self, but even before that, there's like warm up. We got to warm up. Those are the different regulation techniques to like get us centered so that I can be a fit kli, and really like step into, my higher self, my, fuel my day for my neshama, as opposed to my ego. Now, the problem becomes when we don't actually see that that's happening, and then we use something to find calm. We use something to realign with our centered self. We use something to, reorient, and it's really what it is. There was a forest past the Little League field, and that's really the place where people get lost. When they use their phone, when they use food, when they use whatever it is to try to just experience that centered, calm, creative state. They don't understand what is knocking them off. So they use things they don't understand. And then they don't even see that there's this secondary problem of all these different parts pulling us away from ourselves, or these defense mechanisms, call it what you want. And then there's the secondary problem really is what we're doing to take care of an internal state that is really just not regulated.
And then we end up causing probably more problems for ourselves and moving even further away from our centered state.
Yes. So I like to, I'm really all about center, but we cannot forget as Hasidim that center is just like the preface. It's just it's like, because it's not about, that's still about me. That's still about me. I'm centered. I'm calm. I'm good. No, it's not about us. Like as Hasidim, we want more. Okay, that's still ego, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, okay, let's put ourselves aside actually, so we can do our shlichus in this world, which is Hashem saying, make me real. I'm just saying, because I'm so sensitive from every different dimension of the self, and I'm just going to stop for a minute. Physically, I have this, addictive tendencies, so that created sensitivities. Emotionally, sensitive as a highly sensitive person. Spiritually, sensitive as a ger. Rashi qualifies, right? Mentally sensitive because of, the neurodivergent ADHD. So I also need habits to center me so that I could step into my, true self. I found God. I was after college and I found him. But I couldn't keep hold of him. I couldn't keep the passion alive because I did not have boundaries, not in any area of my life, not spiritually, not mentally, not, emotionally, and not physically, that's not to mean that I always stayed firm, but the passion wasn't there. So, yeah.
So this analogy of the big leagues and the little leagues, what I'm understanding from it is that when you're in your centered self, you're not necessarily engaging with something outside of you. You're in a calm internal state where things are kind of good, and you're able to tap into the deeper parts of yourself. When you're playing with and you can let me know if I'm understanding this right. When you're playing with the little leagues, you're outside of your centered self, you're dealing with something outside of you, but it's the lesser parts of you that you don't necessarily want to be directly engaging with. They're always going to be there, but now you're playing with them. You're like engaging with the ego and the different manifestations of that. But then when you're playing with the big leagues, you're also not just like in this, you're not just like laying back and calm, but you are engaging with the higher parts of yourself and the deeper parts of yourself. Does that make sense? Is that what you were
So,
saying, or did I not understand the market
yeah, I
properly?
am saying that, but it could be internal, like in any state, centered, off center, and what I call, a space of higher living. Um, we could be engaging with life. We could be engaging within.
Mm,
Right? Like there could be a trigger from within, a trigger from without. There's a war going on outside of us. Outside, there's a war inside. That's like, the terrorists making balagan, right? So depending on where we are, which field we're playing on, will determine the way we or react or respond. Center is like an internal state. Off center is an internal state. Higher living, like the way that I, like to describe, higher living, it's also an internal state. But the trigger can come from within or without, and the way that we respond, obviously, depends on
mm.
where we are.
So if we're playing with the little leagues, we'll respond from a place of like reaction. And
Yeah.
if we're playing with the higher leagues, and we can respond from a place that's like from a higher living aligned state.
No, even if we're
Mm,
centered, we could respond from you know, um, a good place.
mm,
That's where the discipline comes in. The Rebbe says that there's three foundations of education, not Kabbalah's all discipline and Seder. So as we grow, as we journey in life, everybody, hopefully is in this business of re-educating themselves. And so there are different, we need to, there's certain things in our lives that are non-negotiables. That's where Kabbalah's all comes in. And then there's, then there's regulation, that meaning I need to know how to regulate myself so I can stay disciplined in the face of my non-negotiables. That's where the whole conversation of center comes in. Center is a conversation of regulation. And when I'm regulated, I could still, so it doesn't matter like what, meaning there's a difference between, I could, let's say I'm knocked off my game. There's a lot of sirens yesterday. I can still be emotionally regulated because I'm disciplined. Meaning, or excuse me, I could still be behaviorally regulated. Meaning I'm knocked off my game, but because it's been 7 years of showing up to my food day in, day out in a very systematic, orderly fashion, I'm not going to eat over it.
mm.
Am I emotionally regulated? Lokokach. You know what I'm saying? I was just like knocked off into fight or flight. I got to pull myself back, but I'm aware. And so then I work to come back. It's always like, which direction are you facing? Are you going away from yourself? Or are you coming closer to yourself?
That's a very good question. And so, in using journaling to go towards ourselves, do you have some, like what would the structure look like? I know you said there's a lot of different types. If someone wants to use this practice and this discipline to be able to get all the benefits that you've been describing, which really do sound amazing, and find our center and face ourselves and reach this higher living, what do they got to do?
So let's just talk. First of all, like technically, but panemius and bechatsonius. But panemius, you gotta want it. Like meaning you gotta, want it, believe that's possible, like the idea of journaling, right? And then from like fall in love with the idea. And then the chitzonius is making that a practice, right? So how would you make any habit or anything that you really find valuable a practice? By making it smart, which means like it's like the language of, habits and whatnot. Smart means specific, measurable, achievable, rewarding, and in a timely manner. In other words, how and when. It's unrealistic to think, I mean, there's actually lots of different approaches. But I was going to say it's unrealistic to think that I could show up to journaling every day, unless you're going to show up 1 minute, right? Which is also a technique, the 2-minute rule. Just show up, every day for 2 minutes. But I often suggest, like, pick a realistic amount of, times that you would like to show up in the week, and commit to that, externalize that commitment, right? That also qualifies what you're doing, and then show up to that. How, are we doing 3 pages? Are we doing 10 minutes? Right? So that's the first thing, figuring out, like, any achlata, any, bind it. What is the framework? How are you going to bring it down? So, and then there's the best practices, meaning, what can I do to, to make it easier? This tool that sounds really cool. Let's see. Okay, so let's see. One, I have a whole list here. To know, at first, there are no rules. There are no rules to journaling. There's no right way. Whatever works in catching what's going on inside, that's the derech for you. And that's why we mentioned before, whether it's the phone or, whatever. And as I said before, that what's stopping you, it's actually an inner criticism, meaning, I don't know how to do it, I'm not going to do it at all. It's actually a false belief or cognitive distortion. Then that's a perfect prompt to journal into, meaning, like, use it as a springboard. Where does this vision of perfect and proper journaling come from? Why must it be done right? And what's going to happen if I don't do it right? Right? And what would your practice look like if you let go of these rules? So that's one, just kind of understanding of how to approach it. The time of day matters. If a person is a night person or a morning person, it matters. Follow your circadian rhythm. Most people journal better in the morning. Their brain is fresh. You would be surprised. I don't know how there's so much to write in the morning, but there's often lots of leftover stuff. That is really probably the true purpose of, Kriya Shmalamita, to really resolve all that stuff. But these days, it's left over. And the truth of the matter is, that's what my husband said. If we actually knew how to daven and daven properly, there would be no need for the journal. So anyway, in terms of timing, do what's best for you. Where to write? The idea is to carve out a nook, a space where you get the juices flowing. It's a good idea to have the same place established, go back to that same place, because really you're associating creativity and that habit with that space. So the best place to journal is a place where you're most likely to settle down and write. That could be a coffee shop. That could be, I don't know, park. That could be I wouldn't say your bed, because your bed is associated with sleep. And that's the whole point, to associate a place with something you're doing. An entry ritual. This is already taking it up a notch, but an entry ritual is nice because an entry ritual will ground you.
What is an
Which
entry
means
ritual?
I like to use this. Right. An entry ritual is anything that you do to, like, it's like the key, meaning you're turning the key to the next experience. So the idea of an entry ritual is to settle yourself, breathe. Breathing techniques could actually be an entry ritual. Doing breath work. I like to use essential oils. I actually like to do both before journaling. Quiet music, lighting a candle, having coffee, all these different things are like, it creates the avira, the atmosphere, the mood, for the journaling to have its, best experience. So also tools matter, meaning use the tool that works for you. I do not use white paper. I use shamenet, like off-white. I only use what my husband calls a marker, but because my hand just hurts after writing so much. I cannot use a ballpoint pen, right? These things actually matter. So also to understand, going back to the headspace of journaling, if you missed it, you missed it. I'll call beseder. No big deal. Just go back to it as fast as possible. Just like anything that you're trying to establish in your life as discipline. James Clear, the habits guy, right? We're talking about creating a habit. So he says that, like, in terms of breaking bad habits and creating good ones, just don't make the same mistake twice. You missed it, okay. You tripped up, that's fine. Like, what, we're not meant to be tzaddikim, like it's expected. It's expected. But get back to it as soon as possible. So, but that's really the bottom line. Consistency is the key and reaps the biggest rewards with this practice. So, it's just like any muscle. You want to strengthen that muscle in order to, make it. That's how you create a non negotiable, by showing up to it again and again and again and again.
Why
What else?
why is consistency so important for journaling?
Well, because we want to create a neural pathway. That's a habit. That's what we're doing. Like we want to create a habit, and in order to create that habit, it's not about the amount of times that goes by. It's the amount of times that you do it. Like we don't brushing our teeth is not. We don't have to think about it, because we do it every day at this time, and that it becomes automatic. So with any non-negotiable that we want to incorporate, or boundary that we want to incorporate into our life, journaling being one of them, so we want to show up to it on a consistent basis. That creates the grooves in the brain that says, ding, at this time this is what we do. So that's why consistency is the key. And also, just like regarding like the way that we approach what comes up on the page, there's no editing, and there's no thinking. That's the whole thing. We're trying to bypass the thinking brain. So we actually write fast. We don't slow down. We don't edit. We don't worry. We don't think. We just write.
You write whatever.
That's the whole point.
Whatever's going on in our head.
Yeah, well, that's specific technique. I mean, there's lots of different techniques. I'm saying the 3-page spill is just writing, or morning pages is just writing without without stopping, without thinking, without editing. But like, let's say you're doing a creative or expressive journaling technique, or a specific technique. No, I think all the whole point of the journal is to bypass the critic, to bypass the thinking brain. So it's not so much. It's speed does that. Speed doesn't leave space for or but if we stop to think, we're leaving space. Stopping to think is writing. We're not writing, we're journaling.
Okay.
Actually, writing happens in the space between the two brains, so that's a whole another story in and of itself. So those are some best practices. Also, to keep in mind, your journal is just for you, unless you see that a piece is born, in which case I would say mark it, because the more that you journal, the more that the journals accrue, and then all of a sudden you don't know where that, oh my God, I remember that I wrote that piece that was so awesome, and it's nowhere to be found. So yeah. And what else? Another thing is very important is to date your work. Dating your work is very important, especially again as the journals accrue. Like, it's like years and months. I have journals from the beginning of the war. So it is important. Like, if I wanted to find something, I would easily go back and find it that way. Also, having a title page in a journal is fun, because it kind of like sets the tone and the mood for the entire journal. So these are just some different ideas and fun practices to use. And then there's all different techniques. But like, for example, my title page for this journal right now that I just opened, I guess a day ago, and that's like, or 2 days ago, is this is actually from a very good writing book called Write Your Way Home from Yocheved Rothenberg. She's excellent. She has a lot of different books on different prompts for helping a person through different experiences that they have in their life. So this quote is, I think, from her, and from her book at least. Trust means experiencing God in our lives in a relationship that involves communication, sensitivity, and spiritual awareness. So obviously and that's where I am. Like, there's sirens every other second. There's booming, and like just trying to find myself.
Wow.
So that's the story.
Okay. Wow, this is definitely getting me motivated. I've kept it's interesting. I've kept a journal personally since I'm 11. I have about 7 full ones, but it was never a consistent practice. It was almost like for me, uh, it's so funny, and you can see it from reading the entries when things felt way too much and way too overwhelming to write it down. So when you look at my
Right.
journals, it's like it looks like my life is so terrible. Like if you would just read my journals, you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this girl, like what?" Because I only wrote when things felt really bad, and it would kind of like
Right.
get me down a few notches. But for me personally, it's never been like a consistent practice, and I'm so curious to see what could come up when it becomes consistent.
What you're mentioning now is something very important. Journaling can be used as an emergency measure, or journaling can be used as a preventative medicine. The way that I've been speaking about it here is preventative medicine. What you just described is an emergency measure.
Mm,
I personally cannot use certain techniques in that space of basically getting knocked off center and getting hurt from it and
mm,
falling on my face. I can't use those I can't use certain, I can't just do the 3-page spill because I'm so constricted. I actually have to use a different technique, or actually, I need just to get into my body through breathing or exercise or sleep it off or whatever it is.
mhm,
So that's actually a very important distinction. Um, the journal and its benefits work differently at different internal spaces.
mm. Very interesting. Very interesting. And the truth is, for girls who maybe are starting this year off now, it's the beginning of the year, especially if they're in Eretz Yisrael with what's going on. Maybe it's good even to know that it's there as an emergency measure if necessary. Things feel
Yeah,
way over
sure.
your head. Um, but then, as you said, preventative medicine to get into that practice so that you maybe can, I don't know if we can ever avoid full discomfort, but you can avoid getting to that state where you've lost touch with yourself totally.
Right. I guess I'll share actually from my journal. Like I said, sometimes there's things that are born from the journal. As I mentioned just now, like the journal's for your eyes only, unless you see like, oh wow, this could, I could pull this out and I could use this, let's say, in my WhatsApp group. You're aware that I have like a WhatsApp group where I send, stuff about life, once a week. So this would have been something, or might be still something that I share. This just peaked home, popped up in the journal. Here it says, and this is how I started this day. When the feeling of sadness closes my throat, are the words stuck? When the tears escape without permission, do they have a message? If sarcasm is a cousin of arrogance, then disappointment and doubt are twins. Maybe not identical, but close enough that they smell the same. I'm proud of myself. I got knocked off, slapped in the face, and pushed down, and those close to me didn't notice. And then I go on and I start describing what happened. But that's an example of what's going on in the journal, you know?
Mm.
So yeah.
I have one more question before I get to my final question, which just came up when you were writing because you're a beautiful writer, as you can hear. What about those who are self-conscious about their writing? And you mentioned this before, but like that inner critic that gets in the way, and who say like, "I'm a terrible writer," and who are maybe very unused to matching their thoughts with words.
Right.
That can be articulated onto paper fast enough at the pace of their thinking. You probably haven't experienced this yourself because it sounds like you've been writing for your whole life. But what advice do you have someone who's really unfamiliar with the process of writing, or who feels like they're bad at writing, and it's not going to sound
Right.
good?
So first of all, you don't have to show it to anybody. Second of all, like that's something. But what helps here is specifically what you're saying is writing circles, a writing workshop. There's always many, like these things can teach us how to do it. It could really provide a safe space. We're not feeling safe. That's what's going on. We're not
Mm,
feeling safe enough with ourselves to even bring our thoughts to paper,
mm,
right? So that's where the building has to be focused, like the building within. A writing group will help create that from the outside, and then we want to foster practices that can create that safe space from the inside.
mm.
So it's just about, it boils down to trust, you know
Yeah, that's
trusting
powerful.
yourself.
That's powerful.
trusting Hashem.
I end off with a question, which is, if you could be taken back to the first year that you left home for the first time, and you were given the opportunity to share one thing with your past self, now with based on all of the knowledge and wisdom and experience that you have today, what's the one thing that you would share with that version of yourself?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was go buy a journal. The second thing is boundaries. We need we need boundaries. The truth of the matter is the journal will help you figure out what boundaries you need in your life, whether it's with time, whether it's with food, money, friends, relationships, whatever it is. So they go hand in hand. The journal shows us that which we need to, either kind of close shop, we got to break those habits or build new habits. But it's just about slowing down. It's just we want to slow down, find the pause so we could hear what's going on. We could see the reactions. We could understand, like, wait a minute, is that really the way I want to show up to life? When I had just first left home, I was just my nature is go go go. So I'm for sure that was kaful. It was times who knows what then. But everybody these days, because the world is so close to Mashiach, we're just we're all in mad search of real. So it's like take a break so you could actually see what that looks like and how it smells even and what it feels like, for you.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. And I would love, I don't know when you're doing another writing workshop or opportunity for people to do an online course, but I'd love to share a link for when you do that, because I'm sure that some people can really, really find, even just to get ideas for prompts, like you were mentioning, and to have that
Right.
supportive
Right.
space. That's so cool that you do that, and I'd love to link it. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of this, for being vulnerable, and also sharing some of your own writings. And I think this is going to help a
That's the
lot.
thing. The journal helps us get in touch with our stuff, and the stuff kind of keeps us from our best self. So we get in touch. We get in touch with it. We use the journal to see the stuff, move it to the side, and onward and upward.
And we all have stuff. So that's definitely, yeah,
Yeah,
that's really helpful.
stuff, shtick, it's all the same.
It's all the same. Thank you. Thank you, Chana.
For sure.
Really good to see you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of On Your Own. If you like this episode or think it will be useful to someone else, please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. I would love to connect with you. If you've got any questions, feedback, or ideas for future episodes, you can email me at onyourownpodcast@gmail.com. See you next week, and in the meantime, happy adulting.